Hey everyone, welcome back to the Leadership Project with your host Mick Spears. Our vision is to inspire all leaders to challenge the status quo. We bring you weekly topics and thought-provoking guests to get you to stop, reflect, and think about what it means to be a leader in a modern world. Our aim is to help you become the leader you wish you always had, as we learn together and lead together. Today's episode is brought to you by Pat Flynn and his team at SPI, or Smart Passive Income. I am often asked questions about how I do all the things I do, whether it be this podcast, our cohort-based courses, or just structuring my business. Well, Pat has been a great inspiration to me, and I benefit greatly from being part of his community, SPI Pro, and from the SPI courses and workshops they offer. We are including a link in the show notes where you too can apply to be a part of SPI Pro or take advantage of their amazing courses and workshops. Now, on with the show. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Leadership Project. I'm greatly honoured today to be joined by Stephen Shedletzky, or better known as Shed. Shed is an igniter, a speaker and master facilitator with Simon Sinek Inc. And he helps leaders listen and nurture the voice of others. Listen to and nurture the voice of others. And that's going to be a big part of what we talk today. He's in the middle of writing a book on psychological safety and speak up culture. And that will be the biggest emphasis of our discussion today. But of course, we'll want to learn more from Shed and more about his background. So without any further ado, Shed, please introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit more about your background and what led you to be with us today.
Well, thank you, Mick. So delighted to be here with you and having this conversation. I love that you call it the Leadership Project, because as soon as I hear Leadership Project, for me, I mean, it's a project that never ends. Working on Simon Sinek's, infinite game. There is no end. It's a never-ending project, which I love. I'm here because you invited me, and you're wonderful, and I'm delighted to have this conversation with you, for you and I to grow and learn together and to share this with your audience and hope that it has a good positive impact. I care most, Mick, about fulfillment. Fulfillment is my cause, which is when we use our strengths, we're in flow, we're engaged in activities that feel like play, and we do those things to contribute to something bigger than ourselves, a cause, a purpose, a why. That result is fulfillment. And that each and every one of us has strengths. Each and every one of us can feel connected to things more important than our own life. And when we do those things and we're in servitude, the result is a well-used life, a fulfilled life that not only means something to ourselves, more importantly, means something to others as well. So delighted to hop into this conversation with you and see what magic that we create here.
Thanks, Shed, and thank you for the recognition that the Leadership Project is something that you must always work on. So we don't have an end in mind at all. Leadership is something that you must work on every day, and that's something that resonates strongly with me and with our team and with our audience. So thank you for noticing that. I want to come to that point that you made there about fulfillment. Mm-hmm. What does fulfillment mean to you, Shed?
Yeah, I think I may have said it, but I'll double click. Fulfillment is using our strengths, of which we all have strengths, to contribute to something bigger than ourselves that we care about. The fun thing about strengths is it's very hard for us to read the label in the jar when we're inside the jar. And so I've learned and experienced that we can be blind to our own strengths. Of course, we can be blind to our own weaknesses and blind spots, but we actually need objective feedback and reflection from sources outside of ourselves, whether that be friends or mentors or teammates or a good assessment tool to point out to us, you're really good at that. For me personally, I'm always thinking of better ways to communicate ideas and feelings. I'm in the shower and I'm thinking of, oh, that's a good idea for a tweet. And I'm like, well, doesn't everyone think that way? And the answer is no. We each have strengths that, quite frankly, we take for granted because we can take our own experience for granted. And when we discover those and then use those and use them to contribute to something bigger than ourselves, the result is fulfillment. And I mean, I care deeply about strengths and I care deeply about cause, which I think are the two ingredients to fulfillment: strengths and cause.
That's a wonderful definition, Shed. What I'm looking for here is, what does fulfillment mean to you? So,
to me personally,
when you wake up in the morning.
Great question. I mean, that's guided very much by my purpose. So for me, my purpose, my why, is to engage with people in meaningful ways so that we connect with depth and live in a more fulfilled world. So for me, having conversations like these, talking about the stuff and the things that really matter, that help us feel more deeply connected to ourselves, to the people around us and the world around us. In my first job out of college, Mick, 1,000 people were let go first day on the job for me post-merger. And I saw the impact that uncertainty in a tumultuous culture had, not just on people's productivity, but their mental and physical well-being. And I felt a few months later totally unmotivated, disengaged, uninspired, unfulfilled at that job. And I knew somehow, probably because I'm human, that my cause lived in the opposite. I wanted to feel inspired, safe, fulfilled, motivated. And somehow, again, probably because I'm human and we're wired to serve, I knew that if I made my life and career about that, I would feel it myself. So for me, the more work that I do to help others feel fulfilled by their everyday, the more I feel fulfilled by my everyday.
That's a powerful reflection there. And I'll share for the audience that is the root of joy for many of us, is in the service of others. Was there a particular turning point or a moment of awakening where that realization came to you, or was it something that built over time?
I remember, so I was sitting in my cubicle at my first corporate gig, totally lost. I remember being quite frustrated, quite angry. I was both a mixture of bored and apathetic, and kind of just feeling like I was just wasting, I was wasting time. The first person I made wrong for feeling unmotivated was me, because it was the first time in my life I had made choices where things weren't working out. And so I said, something must be wrong with me. But it wasn't necessarily that things were wrong with me. It was that the situation didn't fit my values and my beliefs and what I wanted to be doing. And so the result that I was feeling was pain. There was a dissonance. And I literally sat in my cubicle, and for some reason I thought of my grandfather, who's a huge inspiration for me personally. My grandfather's a Holocaust survivor. He fought in 1939 with the Polish infantry and the invading Germans. He led 8 other people in hiding and survived the war. Just an amazing, gregarious leader, led an amazing, storied life. And I thought about, at the time I was in my early to mid 20s, and I thought, what was my grandfather doing at this time in his life? And I kind of did the math, and I'm like, yep, he was hiding in the Polish countryside in cornfields and barns from Nazis. And I went, okay, I have to do more. I just knew that to honor his legacy, and he was still alive at the time, and we had a very close relationship. But I just knew that I needed and wanted to do more to honor all that he had sacrificed to get to that point in his life, and to give me life in this country where I live in Canada, and to have all these amazing opportunities afforded to me. That was kind of the light bulb moment for me, where I knew I needed to do more. And so then sort of began some more intentional exploration, some more intentional relationship building that got me onto the path of doing what I'm doing now and what I've been doing for the last, gosh, that was in 2010. So for the last 12 years.
So thank you for sharing so openly the story there and that inspiration, that moment of awakening. Going back to that auditorium or that situation when you were in the company activity and it just didn't feel right, that incongruence, if you like, you spoke about your values and beliefs. What was it that wasn't sitting? Like, tell us more about your values and beliefs and why sitting in that room you felt that incongruence.
I think the biggest one for me is transparency. For better or for worse, I like to know. I like to be in the know. I like to be brought up to speed and on the same page. I'm laughing because the last meeting I just had was with a longtime colleague that I've done work with for many years. And this one colleague probably knows me better than nearly anyone in the world. And they just, we hopped on, we were waiting for one other person, and they just brought me up to speed with a lot of context and more than they would have shared with somebody else, just because they knew that I appreciate it. And that's how I operate at my best, context information. And so for me, I saw change happening in an organization. And as opposed to leaders being vulnerable and sharing what they did know and what they didn't know, they kind of just didn't share anything. And I saw the impact of not knowing on people's well-being. I distinctively remember this one woman, Brenda, she must have worked at the company for close to 40 years. I think she was at year 37 at that point. And I just remember her sitting in trepidation, waiting for her pink slip to come next. And it didn't. Right. She still worked there and she ended up retiring there. But I just remember seeing, when people are laid off, I feel for them. I've been there. When people stay in the organization after the friends around them have been laid off, I feel for them as well. And I've been there as well. And it's not so much, the people who are laid off, they'll land on their feet, they'll figure it out, they'll grow from this opportunity, they'll find who their close relationships are. Like, they will grow from it. They'll be okay, I hope. But I also think about the people who stay and who are now inside of this culture that there's not transparency, there's unknown. Maybe it isn't toxic, but it's not optimal. And so I just remember seeing the impact of leaders not knowing and not sharing, or knowing and not sharing, and its impact on people's well-being, not just their productivity, but their physical and mental well-being. That was the value that for me was being pushed most. And it wasn't with any evil intent. But I think there's something, in the way that I strive to practice as a leader. I strive to practice transparency, which is sharing everything so long as it's of relevance. I don't need to tell you what I had for lunch unless it wasn't of importance. But I think it's important to share what we know and share what we don't know with responsibility and with appropriateness to help bring people along and help people be part of the solution as opposed to part of the problem.
There's so many things I'm picking up there, Shed, that I want to share back to you and make sure that I get it right as well. So if I go on a tangent, please correct me. Everything you're speaking about is speaking about emotion. You've been using the word fear. You've been using the word pain, the way people are feeling. Real human beings are feeling. People that have families at home, people that want to have a life based on joy and purpose and fulfillment. So you're talking about the impact to real people. You spoke about transparency. You spoke about the executives not turning up purposely. You didn't use these exact words, but not turning up purposely to make people feel bad, but not necessarily being aware of the impact of their decisions.
Yeah.
On this topic of transparency, one that I hear often is executives saying, we're protecting the people from, things are going really bad, so I don't want to share everything because I'm protecting them. but you're talking about a feeling that you're sitting there without that information, and that's just as bad as knowing that things are not as they should be. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes. I think that's absolutely right. I mean, I think that great leaders know. So there's a difference, Mick. You know, I'm a believer that we need both leaders and we need managers too. I think there's a lot of sort of conversation in the business zeitgeist that leadership is good, management is bad, and it's like, well, like how many people do you know who have the title manager? Lots of people, and I don't think we should shun a job title. That's not fair. What I do think we need to make a distinguish between is leaders and drivers. Drivers are people who view an organization and its people as cogs in a machine, which isn't healthy. And though you can drive results in the short term, it doesn't create a healthy culture and it doesn't create sustainable long-term results and performance. Like you don't mourn the brake pads in your vehicle when you need to replace your brake pads because they run out. You just get new brake pads. You don't mourn the loss of your brake pad. But leaders view their teams and organizations as what they are, living, breathing organisms, and they treat them as such. And so even if you don't have all the answers, even if there's uncertainty, I think you share as much as you possibly can to help people choose to be a part of the solution and the future, even if it means that roles and jobs and dynamics and things might change. I think there's a way in which we can trust and empower people. And use truth as a source of power. There's always circumstances where it's hard, but I just think more so erring on the side of transparency and truth is just better for organizations.
Oh, I love this, Shed. No, I've been looking for something like this to describe exactly what you just said about leaders versus drivers. We speak about this on the show quite often, that we need leadership. We also need managers and management. Otherwise, actually, nothing really happens. You need to drive to some level of movement, action, results, etc. But that definition that I'm hearing you make is that a leader/manager is someone that's achieving those results through the people, whereas the driver might be doing it at the expense of the people, that the outcome is the obsession and can leave a trail of destruction behind them on the way. Is that a fair definition?
Bingo. I mean, this is about putting inputs ahead of outputs, which is, I mean, it's the reason why Kaizen and continuous improvement works and lean management doesn't work. Because with lean management, you're talking only about the output. And so you're doing everything only thinking about the output, not thinking about the inputs that get you those outputs. And as a leader, your whisper is a shout. And as a leader, the more senior you are, the further away you are from the truth and the experience of the people closest to the customer typically. And so absolutely, it's a double down on the inputs, because when you double down on the inputs, you tend to get the outputs more sustainably and more for the long term. So inputs over outputs. When you obsess about the inputs, it gets you those outputs in the long run.
Yeah, brilliant, Shed. Thank you for sharing that. Coming back to that history then, so you've had that awakening. What led you into Simon's world? How did that come about?
Yeah, a lot of happy accidents there too. So I recall I met with a mentor, a guy by the name of James Powell. A friend introduced us. This would have been the summer of 2010. And we met for dinner the next day. Like, when does that ever happen? And he's this just like amazing, dynamic, just connected, wonderful person. And we became fast friends and we stayed in touch, which was wonderful. And I remember saying to him at this dinner, because I was very much lost in this first corporate job. And I said to him, I was about to be moved into a marketing role at this company. And I said to him, I'm afraid to move into marketing for an organization where I don't believe what they sell and how they sell it. And he went, watch this TED Talk. And he sent me a follow-up email after our dinner, and he sent me Simon Sinek's How Great Leaders Inspire Action TED Talk, which is the third most watched talk on all of TED.com. the one where Simon's talking about the golden circle. Yeah. And the first thing I did was procrastinate for about 2 months. I didn't open the link for about 2 months. And I remember it was probably August, and I opened it and watched it and just had kind of that puppy dog, everything this well-spoken dude with a poor quality video, everything he's saying makes sense. I had just never thought about it in these terms or ways. I mean, I think it's the definition of a great quote, which is we love quotes because someone has an ability to articulate something we know to be true and articulates it in a simple, easy to understand, actionable way, right? No one reads a quote and it's like, oh, I never thought about that before. You hear a quote and you're like, yes, I know that. And so, Simon had just done about 18 minutes straight of really good quotes. And I went, yes. And so I started sharing his ideas because Simon is so good at being an orator and building a movement. And I just started sharing his ideas with anyone who would listen. I'd take out a pen and a napkin or a little sheet of paper and draw the golden circle and explain it to them. I then, a few months later in the fall of 2010, went to hear Malcolm Gladwell speak, author of Outliers, Tipping Point. And Simon spoke just before him. And what I had felt on the TED video screen was amplified, 10x with Simon in the room. Loved his talk, totally just fell for him and his ideas. I bumped into him in the hall by chance, and I just began listening and watching to every single thing that I could find. I read his book. I sent him a note on LinkedIn while he still responded to notes on LinkedIn. I years later, managed the team that would respond to those notes that came in on LinkedIn. And just right time, right place. I sent him a note and said, so enjoyed your talk, and I'm going to read your book. And he said, I hope you enjoyed the book more than you enjoyed the talk. And I said, well, I don't like to read that much, so probably not that likely, but I'll give it a go. And I read his book and loved the book, Start With Why. I loved how it ended with his sort of personal story and personal touch. And I reached back out to him and wrote what I sort of have now termed a 5-point, a network with intent, 5-paragraph email, which is, this is how we know each other. So there's some sort of warmth at the beginning. This is why you inspire me. And if you get that right and they're legit, they'll keep reading. Because of said inspiration, here's what I'm inspired to do. Here are the questions I have for you, or how I make up that you can help me. Do you like coffee or tea, or do you drink anything? Can I buy you that thing? And I sent him that email, and I was very proud of it. And I heard back from him like almost instantaneously. And it was an autoresponder saying, I no longer respond to my professional email. Send notes to so-and-so and so-and-so for said inquiries. And it was 3 people. And I picked 2 of the 3 of them because I wasn't so audacious to believe that this was a business inquiry. And I heard back and just formed relationships with people on his team. And one thing led to the other, where I became the 4th person to join his team, and started answering fan email and did the Start With Why podcast for many years. And sort of one thing led to another, and there was some trust and relationship developed, and more opportunities came. So that's really the story of how I got to know Simon's work, meet him, and join his team. And yeah, it's been it's now been 10 and a half years that I've been on the team working with him and sharing his message, which has been a true honor. And I've grown so much and met so many amazing people because of it.
That's a wonderful happen chance that I, for one, am glad happened. First of all, you've supported him to get his message to a broader audience, and you and your team of igniters to help people to take that wonderful codification or the wonderful articulation that he has as to how this can be, but then to put it to people's kind of life, the live your why, the know your why, live your why concept, not just start with why, but know your why, live your why. And you've done an amazing job, you and your team, with that. So helping his message get to a broader audience. And now you in turn, you're now coming out of that with writing your own book and having your own voice Shed. So tell us about that. Tell us about your new book and why you picked the topic that you've picked.
Yeah. So the book I'm writing and working on right now, the working title is Speak Up Culture. When leaders truly listen, people step up. And I felt very passionate about including the word truly, because listening is a skill. There are people who can be good listeners, but the intent behind your listening, is it listening to manipulate, or is it listening to have compassion and to desire to connect and do right by people and serve them? So I felt very passionate about including truly in there. And for me, Mick, I mean, and as for I'm sure many people, yourself and those listening, there have been teams and organizations and relationships that I've had where it feels very safe to speak up. And you know, when talking about psychological safety, and Amy Edmondson, who's brilliant, and you know, who I call the founding mother of psychological safety, she describes it as having high candor and low fear. Not no fear, but low fear. And we've all had these relationships where there's safety and we feel like someone has our back and we trust them. And we talk about uncomfortable things that help us grow and help us grow closer together and have us learn more about us and just make us better people. And then I'm sure we've also, most of us, some of us, I know I have been parts of teams and organizations and relationships where you don't have that. And there seems to be things that are just, we don't talk about that, or no, or landmines where you say the wrong thing to the wrong person and it comes back to bite you. And I mean, one of my favorite quotes comes from Andy Stanley, which is, leaders who do not listen will eventually be surrounded by people who have nothing to say.
Yeah.
And so as I've really dived into learning more about what is a speak up culture, how do we create speak up cultures? How is silence dangerous inside of organizations, from as innocuous as missing opportunities or not innovating to as devastating as the firm failing or even death. In the case of the NASA Challenger disaster, the Boeing 737 MAX 8 disasters, which are documented speak up issues. How do leaders create environments where they get the truth from their people and they reward that truth such that it keeps coming? Because as soon as you repeatedly ignore or worse, punish people for sharing their truth, that's when all of a sudden, zip, the truth just doesn't come. And as Admiral Bill McRaven said, bad news never gets better with time. So yeah, that's the topic of the book I'm writing now.
I can't wait to read it, Shed. And
Same.
so many things that you're sharing with it. I'll share with you openly here. I've got a flood of emotions flowing through me right now because as you're talking, I'm thinking about the experiences that I've had where that hasn't been in case. They're the ones that I remember so clearly.
Yeah.
Of course, I do remember wonderful buses where I've had that psychological safety, where I can speak up without any fear of judgment, retribution, etc. But the ones that I remember more clearly, to be honest, are the negative ones where I'll paint a picture here. The ones where someone says something in the room and everyone has an audible in-breath. They go, oh, I wouldn't have said that in this environment. Or you've said that to the wrong person, etc. And it's just wrong.
Yeah.
And it makes everyone walking on eggshells and not say what needs to be said.
Yeah.
And I come back to that room that you spoke about, Shed, where you were feeling like the executive was disconnected from what people on the shop floor were saying. Well, is it any wonder that executives end up making decisions that might be short-sighted, might be ill-informed, etc., if no one is speaking? How can an executive make an informed decision if they're not informed?
Or even sometimes executives will make the right decision. Or, I mean, I like to steer clear from right and wrong because it's all context. I don't think there's right and wrong, but a sound, good business decision, but they haven't brought the people with them.
Yeah, okay.
And even if it's the quote on, even if it's a decision that makes sense, they haven't ushered people along that by the time that it's announced or passed down, it's still responded with cynicism or I don't feel that I'm heard or that I matter. I mean, the trouble and the hard thing with creating a speak up culture is you hear things you may not want to hear, and you hear things that slow things down in the short term. It's hard. It's hard to have the honest, truthful conversations, but it allows you, to your point, to make better informed decisions and then usher and bring people along with you, such that by the time that you make decisions or communicate them, you know how to do so in a way that helps people want to be part of the future that you're trying to create. Because I see so many executives making decisions, and even if they're sound good decisions, they haven't brought people along. So the very people that are expected to execute on them, there's cynicism, or it's there's only driving because you haven't brought them along with you.
Yeah. No ownership, no buy-in, no engagement. If people don't feel like they've been heard and that their opinions were valued.
Yeah. And Mick, just to say quickly that, it's a shame, and it's so funny in our human experience that we tend to take good friendship and good parenthood and great leadership for granted until it's no longer there, or until we have the opposite. And it's a shame that, when I describe speak up culture, that it's so often that we think of the negative or hard experiences, but it's just part of the human experience. But for you to share, and I've been with you, I feel you on it's politics. It's like, from in Canto, we don't talk about Bruno. Like what aren't we talking about here? And for those of you who don't know that reference, you just don't have a 6-year-old like me. That's Disney's latest movie. But it's awful. And think about how much time and energy needs to be spent by your people to figure out, what do I need to say and whom and how and what way in order to just make the right decision for the people and for this business. And being involved in these relationships at work where there's either toxic positivity, which is we only talk about the future and we only talk about good stuff. Well, that's not human. Can we talk about the fact that 4 of my friends were just laid off last week and I'm going through grief? Like, can we talk about that? No, we only want to talk about the future. Well, that's not possible. Like, we need to move through emotion. Or even worse, gaslighting, which is when your people do risk and share, this is how I feel. And a leader goes, no, you don't feel that way. It's like, no, I'm pretty sure I do. And if I'm punished for feeling that way, like, you can't make me not feel it. I'm only going to feel it more and worse. So sayonara. Like, why do you think we have the great resignation and great talent shuffle? It's not because people don't want to go back to an office. Yes, people want flexibility, but they want good cultures where they're treated as human beings. And the most extreme with gaslighting and these toxic cultures where people's experience literally gets worse the more they have to deal with leaders in an organization. And it's not done with evil intent. The road to hell is paved with good intentions, as we know that cliche. But it comes down to good leadership, and we don't have enough of it.
Yeah. I think that's important to note. But unless they're a sociopath, leaders don't turn up purposely each day going, I'm going to do a bad job today, but they lose their way or they don't have enough self-awareness to know the impact that they're having on others.
Yes.
There's so much to unpack with what you just said. I want to start with this one. It's been building as we've been going through the conversation. A lot of people, when they talk about psychological safety, they start wondering what it all means, and you get this feeling about being warm and fuzzy, used toxic positivity where everyone just feels happy all day and all this kind of stuff. But you also earlier, you've used the words truly, you've used the words truth, you've used the words candor in talking about Amy's work and radical candor.
Yeah,
tell us,
Scott, yeah.
Tell us more about why it's not warm and fuzzy, it's about candor. What is candor?
So one of the misunderstandings with psychological safety is people think it's about just harmonies on Kumbaya all the time. And it's like, no, that's not what it is. Psychological safety means, so candor means that we have the ability to have the honest, truthful conversations. Kim Scott calls it radical candor. I don't love that term because I think people can read but let's face it, most people read covers of books, not books. And I think we can get away with, radical candor. That means that I can be a radical asshole.
Say whatever I want.
No. Right. It's so Kim Scott describes it as challenge directly and care personally. You can care personally, but not challenge directly, which means that I'm being nice rather than being kind. You can challenge directly and not care personally, and then you're being kind of a jerk. Or not kind of, you are being a jerk. But so radical candor, or what I call candor with care, it's about challenging directly and caring personally. Psychological safety is about creating an environment where people feel safe to have canderous conversations, to talk about all the things, not just good news, but also talk about, we have an issue here. There's some tension in this team. There's a production issue, there's a safety quality issue, and that the truth is rewarded. And it might be, this is awful. This means that we're behind schedule and we have to tell client bad news, or we have to communicate to stakeholders or shareholders or whatever it might be that we're not going to meet our arbitrary projection. But we care more about safety and quality than we do about speed and money. And if you have those values too, you'll join us still.
Yeah.
And so psychological safety is about the ability to have conversations, the truthful, real conversations that allow us to come closer together and move further together. It's about saying, I'm not trained for my job. I need help. I'm having trouble at home and it's affecting my work. I'd like to debrief that last meeting we had because I think we can do things better, not attacking anyone. Let's talk about improvement, and building rituals and systems that support that. Because if you put a good person in a bad system prevails every time. So I know one of your previous guests is my good friend, Lee Prosenchak, that I've done a lot of work with. And Lee and I co-facilitate together quite a bit. And every time that I co-facilitate with Lee or anyone, I call them right after. And I do it when things go great, and I do it when things go bad. Because if I only call people when things go bad, that's when the Jaws music plays in the background when I'm calling them. And when I want to call people, especially people that I'm more senior to them, when they see my name on their phone, I want them to smile and I want them to want to pick up. And this is something I learned from my mom. My mom is an interior decorator, and she would always call her vendors when things went well. How many times do you receive calls from suppliers or calls from clients or calls from customers where, hey, Mick, I just wanted you to know that everything turned out wonderful. Thank you. And it's like, all right, amazing. Which means that when something goes wrong, so Mick, I hate doing this, but it was a 7 out of 10. Can we chat about that? Right. And what's wonderful is when you build it in as a ritual, what begins to happen is Lee or I or my co-facilitator and I will begin not arguing for credit. We'll argue for responsibility. I messed that up. Could have been better. Right. And I'm owning it, as opposed to having to do the hard work to be like, you really messed up slide 17, or, you didn't make that participant feel so safe when you said that thing. People begin to own it themselves. And so I think we need to build, in order to have psychological safety, we need not just the mindset to want it, the actions to do it. We need the systems to help make it so and make it easy.
Well, obviously we love Lee on this show, and his interview was amazing. And we love his ability to give someone the environment where they can be themselves, to show what's really going on with them. And he's amazing. And I love hearing that the two of you have that relationship where you can be candorous and caring with each other with low fear. And that was the key message I took from you, to be candorous about the truth with care and with low fear.
Yeah. And I'll just add, I'm titling the book Speak Up Culture because I don't love the term psychological safety, because it feels to me like it's a very academic, putting a white lab coat on a very human experience.
Yeah, cool.
So for me, I like calling it Speak Up Culture because it's also, people don't buy drills, they buy holes. That's the whole. The whole is you get a speak up culture when you have psychological safety.
Yeah.
The other thing, Amy Edmondson, so much respect for her and her work. She wrote the book, The Fearless Organization. And I harp against fearless. There is no such thing. Like we say, the fearless leader, never met one. Like no one is fearless. If we didn't have fear, we wouldn't need courage.
Yeah.
And so it's not about no fear. It's about low fear, right? Because speaking up, it's a risk. It's a risk to our reputation. It's a risk to our relationships because it's hard. It's like, oh, I got to have that hard conversation with Mick. What if I say something that really triggers him and pisses him off, and then all of a sudden we don't have a relationship? It takes a risk, or it tarnishes or hurts our relationship. It's also a job risk to take that risk to speak up to someone more senior than us. And so having psychological safety means that there's low fear such that it makes it easier to take that risk and to hop into. I sort of envision speaking up as a bit of a wrestling ring, because there are many times in my career where I've chosen to speak up and it's gone well. There's also a few times I've spoken up and it hasn't gone well. But every time I do it, I'm like, should I do it? Do I do it? Do I do it? I'm going to do it. And I open up the ropes and I go into the ring, and the spotlight's on me, whether it's a one-on-one conversation or a one-to-many, and my heart's beating and the anxiety is there, and I say the thing. And if it goes well, it's rewarded, and I'm all the more likely to keep doing it. And even better, it sends a message to others. That type of behavior is rewarded here. Keep doing it. So long as you do it with tact and respect and diplomacy, we have to create organizations where speaking up is rewarded. Otherwise, you're at risk of not working with all the right information. And then you make poor decisions inside of a vacuum.
There's a lot to unpack there again.
Apologies for that.
No, this is brilliant.
I have a knack. Yeah.
I just love I'm just loving this. So fearless, I agree. There is no such thing as fearless. We do want courage, and we talk about the courage to speak up. And now you're bringing in reward. And I want to propose to you here that it's about getting the balance where the reward always outweighs the fear, and therefore the person takes the courageous step.
Oh, beautiful.
How does that sound?
So when that's interesting. The reward outweighs the fear. Yeah. So that's very good. So what I've been playing with is a model of the two components of the speak up culture are encourage and reward. And it's a cycle. So I will speak up because I feel encouraged to do so. I think this is part of the academics call this voice calculus of, is it worth the calculus of, if I speak up, will it cause more good than harm? Is the potential risk to me worth the potential benefit to many others? This is sort of the calculus we have to do when going through the courage of speaking up. But we will speak up if we feel enough encouragement that it's worth it, either from our leaders or, in the case of the Boeing 737 MAX 8 devastations, there were senior managers and engineers who just saw so plainly that if they kept going, the safety of the planes that they put out to airlines and in the air, like, there were people who were willing, though there was fear of losing their jobs, they were willing to lose their jobs and put their jobs on the line because they were connected to something more important than their fear. But it's encourage and reward. So what happened at Boeing is a few people spoke up and said, this is not right. This is not safe. We're sacrificing quality and safety in the name of profit. We got to shut down this facility in Renton, Washington. And they were told no. There was one individual, Ed Pearson, who was a senior manager, retired naval officer, who said, I've seen operations in the military shut down for less. And in the military, you shut down an operation when the cost so severely outweighs the benefit. And the response to, I've seen missions shut down for less in the military, was, this is not the military. This is a for-profit organization. But as soon as it was now repeatedly ignored, or worse, punished for speaking up and sharing truth, the likelihood that individual will keep going is diminished. even more so, that individual is now sharing back with their community. It didn't go well, right?
Okay.
But I'm still going to keep doing it, or I'm done.
Okay.
Right. And they go into apathy.
So now we're talking organizational learning. So you're starting with the encouragement, so getting people to speak up. And then
Yep.
and then you're going to see the reward tip in one of two ways, is what I'm hearing, Shed. One will be a learned reward where, Shed was rewarded for speaking his mind. Or
Yep.
you're going to see learned helplessness, where people go, or learned fear, where people are going to go, oh my God, Shed was fired because he spoke up. Yeah. Okay.
So I think it's those three. So it's either reward, ignore, or punish.
Yeah. Right.
Reward comes in the form not of bonus, promotion, and a cake in your name. Reward can be, thank you. I know that was hard to bring up. And I know it creates more work for you and the team, but it was the right thing. Thanks. Let's figure this out. Reward could mean, we're not going to do that, and here's why, but that's a really good insight and contribution. You didn't know the full perspective, which is on me as your leader for not communicating that. But I really appreciate you bringing that. Keep doing it. Right? Reward doesn't mean here's another gold ticket. Reward means because you spoke up, you are made to feel that you and your opinion and your experience matter. Keep doing it. Ignore, which I think is learned helplessness, which is I keep speaking up. People say, I hear you, but nothing changes. Right? And it isn't just one instance. It isn't just two instances. It's many, to the point that it's now apathy. Like, it's not even worth it for me to speak up because I keep doing it. It's no longer encouraged. It's not being rewarded. And so I'll just zip it and I'll speak when spoken to, which means that you lose the engagement and discretionary effort and risk taking of your people. And then worse is punished, where you say, I think there are some issues. And the response is, no, you're the issue. Stop it. Now we're getting into gaslighting and punishment, which is now we're at Dr. Evil's table. And if you don't tell Dr. Evil the thing that he wants to hear, boom, a red button is pushed and you're thrown into the depths with a chimney. That's dangerous.
It's just because you're not a team player, Shed. That's all it is, right? So you bring up statements like that. It might not be you get fired, but the words, you might as well have been punished in that way, right? So yeah.
Yeah. Or the problem isn't with the team, the problem's with you.
Yeah.
It's like, okay. And so, all right, like now that's into gaslighting.
Yeah.
Which means, so this is a quote from my friend Tim McClure, that the biggest concern for any organization should be when their most passionate people become quiet or silent. Right? That's real dangerous. And for you as a leader, if the people who typically speak up and the people who are typically willing to be the ones who ask the first question in a Q&A period, or the ones who are willing, as soon as they become silent, that's a tip for you that you as a leader or your leadership team are doing something that is having that person choose to be silent now. And there's a difference between letting others speak first and someone when you go, hey, Shed, you usually speak up a lot. Anything you have to add here? Nope. Nothing. Not worth it, because anytime I add something, I just get in more trouble. So I'm good.
I'll tread a little bit carefully here. I've seen this firsthand, Shed, and I don't want to betray any commercial confidences, but
yeah,
when it gets to the point where people are going into a meeting with a senior executive and their objective becomes to have no actions come from the meeting.
Yeah.
To say as little as possible, because you're not ready for that. You don't want that retribution, right? So these are the kind of learned behaviors that start happening. And unfortunately, I've seen it firsthand, which leads
I've seen it firsthand as well, which means that you get it. It's typical driver behavior.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, yeah.
That leads me to an important question. I'm going to paint a picture here and say that there's going to be many leaders that are listening to this show right now, Shed, that believe in the things that you and I believe. They believe in speak up culture. They believe in psychological safety, accepting that you don't like that term as much, but they hear about psychological safety. They want to know what it's about. They hear what it's about and they go, yeah, yes, that's what I want. What if that leader is working in an environment right now where it doesn't exist? Either it doesn't exist corporately in the culture, or maybe they've got enough self-awareness to be reflective and go, oh, wow, you know what? I haven't created that for my own team. Where do they start?
So I think a leader needs to focus on, and any one of us, because remember, Mick, we haven't discussed this, but I believe we both know this and believe this, that leadership is not a title, it's a behavior. And the only requirement you need to be a leader is followers, which means you can be at the lowest ranks of an organization and absolutely be a leader and have influence and have power. You can also have a title and authority and have power and influence because of the position you hold. And people may do as you say, not because they want to, but because they feel they have to. That's driver authority power. But this is for formal leaders and for anyone who wishes to lead. I think the first thing that we ought to do is focus on what's in our actual control. We cannot change that which we cannot change. And so for those sitting here being like, oh, I really believe this, I want to create this, but you're pointing the finger out, the leaders around me are blind to this, don't care about this. Well, all you can do is point the fingers back at yourself. And this is the reason why every single leadership development program I've ever experienced, participated in, facilitated, always starts with a module on lead self. Before you can lead others, you must learn how to lead yourself and work on your own instrument. So I think leaders have to focus in, all right, what's in my actual control? What's in my influence? Who's in my span of control? How can I make the culture around me one that has a speak up culture and has high candor and low fear, even if it's not being provided to me, which is dangerous because it's very hard to keep providing an experience for others when you aren't having it being provided to you. And you really gotta, get support through friendship, through a coach, through whatever it might be to help you when you aren't getting what you need to be the leader that, you don't have the leader you wish you had, and you're trying to be the leader that you wish you had. Yeah. That's hard and you can burn out. So careful and get support. The other thing is, okay, cool. Focus on what's in your control. The other is, if you want more of a speak up culture, or you come to realize, wow, I think I could be doing more. Well, you got to go first. You can't just expect your people to speak up. You have to create mindset, actions, and systems that make it so, which could be, there's great benefit in research to show that having an anonymous hotline, an independent hotline, helps when people feel that there's somewhere that they can make a call and be heard. If you have these hotlines and no one uses them, that's a sign that you don't have a healthy psychological, safe and speak up culture. When it's actually good when people call it, right? That's a healthy thing. Go first, ask, listen. When people say the thing that you don't want to hear, you got to go, oh, that's really hard for me to hear, but thank you for sharing it. And I'm just going to stick in that for a second. You actually have to do the work to be curious. And the gateway to curiosity is questions, open-ended questions with genuine concern and genuine care to listen. That if you want this, you got to do the inputs to get it, and keep encouraging and keep rewarding people as more truth comes. And it's hard because more and more employees, especially, outside of, in the global North and Australia, for the most part, employees as activists is a real thing. And employees expect their organizations to have a stance and a belief to create a better human existence, which is great. But if you really want to speak up culture, you gotta be prepared for what's going to come, and you actually have to want to hear it, and you actually have to want to do something with it.
So the things I'm hearing here, Shed, I'm going to use the famous quote, be the change that you want to see in the world. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Start with yourself, and then start with those that are immediately around you that you do have some influence over. And then that can start having a knock-on effect on the organization around you. Mm-hmm. I want to ask another question, right? So let's say the leader is trying that. They're starting with themselves. They're starting with those around them. and they're having their team meetings and they're opening up, they're encouraging, and they're still hearing crickets.
Mm-hmm.
What role do you think vulnerability could play here?
Huge. So I think a couple of things that if you're starting and you're trying and you're getting crickets, I think a couple things. One is change up your format, which is I go to my weekly meetings to my, 7 direct reports and their, 15 direct reports, and I'm getting crickets. Well, it's like, well, people speaking up in a room of 30, like that's hard. Are you in Zoom? Yes, we're in Zoom. Use poll functionality. Ask them to use the chat. Say on a scale of 0 to 10, 10 meaning the most clear you ever heard a presentation, rate this presentation. And I'm not looking for 10s. I'm looking for honesty. And if everyone shares a 10, go, well, what would make it an 11? Like change your format. Use breakout rooms, put a senior leader in each of the breakout rooms and have smaller group conversations. Like the number of times I've heard senior executives go, any questions? 3, 2, 1. No questions again. All right, let's move on. It's like, no, there are always questions. You're just not asking well enough, hard enough, or in the right format. So change up the format. By all means, vulnerability and even telling on yourself, saying, I've really been wanting feedback from the team, haven't been getting it. That's okay. I know it's a risk to speak up. Know that the first person that speaks up gets a copy of my favorite book, like whatever it might be. But I'm going to tell on myself a little bit and say, here are some things that I know that I could be doing better. Am I really off base? Anyone have something to add? But yeah, I haven't found research here, but I could only imagine that it becomes harder to speak up as the number of people gets bigger, to a point where then you're one in a crowd of many, and it's a lot easier to speak up because you're anonymous, sort of, or you can drop the mic and run. But yeah, I think leaders need to switch up the format, and to find, if you look at your team and go, who do I think was most likely to take the risk and has a good pulse of what the team feels? And can I pull them aside and say, hey, Mick, I'm really trying to create an environment where people feel safe, where we're hearing more ideas. What more can I be doing? Do you have any ideas? Are there things that don't tell me names because it's not productive, but are there things that you're hearing that we could do better here? Get truth and change up format.
And we're coming back yeah, that was really good. So I like the point about format, thinking about the environment that you've created, how many people are in the room, asking better questions. That last bit that you said there, Shed, going to one of the team members that you think has good ideas and go, ask them, what can we do here to get people to really speak their mind without fear of judgment, without fear of retribution, to have the courage to speak up and say what needs to be said. I think ask better questions and then listen to the answer. Once again, I feel like we're MBS students now, Michael Bungay Stania, right? But it works. It works. If you're stuck, ask the questions. And the vulnerability, openly share something about yourself that you believe is potentially a weakness or something that to break that trend where people are just telling you what you want to hear. Speak a truth. Speak a truth that probably most people know, but verbalizing it might give them the courage to then go, while you're at it, boss. Yeah. When you do this, do you know that it comes across this way? Right. So you need to break that drought somehow. Yeah, very good.
And it's, I'm a big believer in having feedback-rich cultures where we're consistently having conversations with each other. And my favorite equation for feedback is FBI, feeling, behavior, impact. Behavior, when you did this, it made me feel this way, and the impact is. And it's a great level or a great series of ingredients for constructive feedback as well as positive feedback. Like I could say, Mick, great job today. And you're like, cool, thanks. But it's like, well, what did I do great? So I can keep doing it, right? I can FBI. Like I feel so engaged in this conversation because I can tell how much you care and the level of preparation and presence that you've brought into this conversation. And the impact is I'm all yours. Like, let's have the conversation. Let me know what you need. I'm here to help you. Right. Similarly, let's just make up a scenario where, let's say we've set a time to do this podcast and you missed the first one, you missed the second one, and we're finally here for the third one and you're 10 minutes late. And like, I'm fuming. Right. And I could go, hey, Mick, I got to tell you, I'm feeling pretty frustrated. But now this is the third time or second time we've rescheduled and you've been 10 minutes late. The impact is I'm not so jazzed to do this. First and foremost, are you okay? Because I can't imagine that this is your standard of how you want to show up. Like, everything all right, which is really hard when you're now at a level where you're pissed off and triggered. But to say, like, I can't imagine you want to be like this unless you do, but like, are you all right? And you could say, well, first of all, sorry and thank you. And here's what's going on for me. And I can actually have a window into empathy as opposed to making things worse for you. Right? Cool. So I'm a real big believer in having feedback-rich cultures, which is a way to help us get this environment where we're sharing truth with one another.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm really big believers of leaders outing themselves on saying, here's some of my weaknesses. Like, here are some of the ways I know I'm going to let you down. That's can be hugely powerful.
It builds trust because they know already, Shed. For most people, they're quite in tune to what the strengths and weaknesses of the boss are. And if you're open about it, it builds trust. Oh, wow. That's cool. That's cool. He speaks the truth, right? Or she speaks the truth, right? So, it does build trust when you openly share these things.
Yeah. I did one-on-one client work with a very senior executive female leader, and she began to share with me that she, her gift is that she's able to like see connections and strategy that other people can't see. And she has this ability to ask questions out of left field that people never really think or consider. And so she's going to domain experts and asking them questions and making connections that they themselves haven't been able to see. And she knows, and she's felt this like awkward thing where by just being herself, she makes people feel really insecure. And she's like, I don't know what to do about it. I know it's the impact. And I'm like, inoculate, tell them, hey, I got this thing in my brain where I just make connections and I'm not going to not tell you about them. I may not be right. I may ask you questions about stuff that you've never thought of before, and know that I'm not necessarily right, or I may be asking you questions that make you feel uncomfortable. It's not my intent. I just can't not do it. So if I do that, like, let's make a safe word, like say yo-yo ma or red flag or whatever. So I know that I'm doing it, and know that I'm not expecting you to have an answer now, but let's talk about it and see if there's something worthwhile there, because she's really smart. Yeah. And it's her intelligence and her ability to ask these questions actually has a negative impact, even though it isn't her intention. Yeah. And so it's just tell people, this is my intention. If it has an impact other than that, just let me know and we'll work through it.
That openness and transparency, coming back to transparency again, would be very disarming, and people would be very okay with that. They really would. Once it's spoken about it, people get very okay with it very quickly. Yeah. Also, like what you were sharing about the feedback there about being specific, that's also a good way to break toxic positivity, is to be more specific when you're giving positive feedback too. Yes. Is to say, not just, oh, that was a great job, Shed. Go, and I really loved it when you did this, and the impact was this. Yeah, great feedback there as well. And of course, with constructive feedback, it needs to be as specific as possible as well.
And it's a great way. There's some stats to prove this, but I forget what the stats are, but I think it's a Gallup study that showed that if you completely, I think these are the numbers, if you completely ignore your direct report, the likelihood of their disengagement, I know the numbers. The likelihood of their disengagement is 40%. They're 40% more likely to disengage if you completely ignore your direct report. If you only point out the things they suck at, their likelihood of disengagement is 22%. it nearly improves by half or double just because you acknowledge they exist.
Yeah, right.
It's still not great, but you acknowledge that they exist. But if you go out of your way to point out just one thing that they're good at and say, keep doing it, their likelihood of disengagement, 1%.
There we go.
Didn't require a bonus or a ping pong table or any of that. Just to say, you're really good at this, keep doing it. Let's find opportunities for you to do more of that.
That is awesome. That's awesome.
That's
I'm gonna find that report. That's my new research for this week. That's brilliant.
Cool.
Shed. I love that.
Let me know if I got the stats wrong.
Oh, good.
I'm that type of guy that when someone says great work, I'll say, I don't mean to be egotistical or rude, but like, can you tell me what was good about it so that I can do more of it?
Yeah, very good. Very good. Yeah. All right. That probably brings us to a close, Shed. Wonderful sharings today. So many nuggets of gold here today around this speak up culture, around encouraging people to speak up, around having that candor, not warm and fuzzy. This is candor. This is the truth. Having low fear and having a reward mechanism that rewards the speak up. So thank you so much for sharing all of your nuggets of gold with us today. I truly appreciate it, and I know the audience would as well. I'd like to go to our rapid fire round now.
Let's do it.
So tell us, Shed, what's the one thing that you know now that you wish you knew when you were 20?
The thing I so clearly know now that I maybe kind of sort of knew when I was 20, but I'd really want to reaffirm it, is that we need each other. We just, as a human being, we are junk as individuals, but together we're remarkable. And that we don't need, hundreds of friends. We only need 5 real good, close relationships. Find your 5, nurture them, and know that we need each other.
Love it. What's your favorite book?
My favorite book, I'm going to give an Adam Grant give and take, Why Helping Others Drives Our Own Success. Next to Simon Sinek's books, I think it's the book that has really changed my mindset and my actions and behaviors more than any other book.
Yeah, nice pick. And what's your favorite quote?
My favorite quote comes from Teddy Roosevelt, and it's right here behind me, which is, nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care.
Yeah, brilliant. I love that as well. I have a collection of these quotes, and that's one of them in my collection as well. I just love it. And finally, Shed, obviously we've got the new book coming out. I know you're working hard at it. We're all excited to see that. If people want to know more about you and get in contact with you, how do they find you?
Yes, I believe for the time being, I'm the only Stephen Shedletzky in the entire world, if you could imagine nearly 8 billion people and only one of them with my name, I think. So all you handfuls of Shedletzkys out there, please don't name anyone Stephen, unless you really want to. But if you Google me, you can find me in all the places. I'm most active on LinkedIn, and I'm working on a new website that should be out by the time this goes live, which is shedinspires.com.
Awesome. All right. And we'll put those links in the show notes as well. So once again, Shed, thank you so much. This has been enlightening for me. Just loved it. Love this conversation. It could go on forever as far as I'm concerned, but we better wrap it up now. So thank you, Shed.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mick. I hope our conversation helps your audience.
Awesome. Thank you for listening to the Leadership Project podcast at mixbeers.com. A big call out to Faris Sadek for his sound design and editing of our audio and video content, and to the whole team at TLP, Joanne Gozon, Gerald Calabo, Rika Vidanes, and my wonderful supportive wife, Say Spears, who is also our operations manager. This show would simply not be possible without you. If you've enjoyed the show, please leave us a rating and review at Apple Podcasts. You can catch the video podcast and our video of the week at the Leadership Project YouTube channel, and you can join the conversation at the Leadership Project Facebook community group. We look forward to bringing you more great content and interviews next week as we continue to learn together and lead together. In the meantime, please do take care, look out for each other, and always remember to challenge the status quo.